Hello, my name is Alice Mullen. I'm a field specialist in food and agriculture with the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension. This is part 2 of a series called Food Safety, a Marketing Strategy for Farmers Markets. This part will talk about getting ready for market. There are many possible ways that food can become contaminated by harmful microorganisms. Microbial contamination can happen on produce at any point from farm to fork. To help reduce the risks of produce becoming contaminated, it's important to start at the farm and look at places on the farm that potential contamination could happen. And this is a list of some of the places that could occur. To help reduce the risk of contamination of produce, it's important to follow good agricultural practices, or GAP. And GAP looks at the whole process produce goes through from production to transporting. An excellent resource on GAP and reducing the risks of contamination on the farm is a publication that was produced by Cornell called Food Safety Begins on the Farm. And you can download a copy of this publication at gaps.cornell.edu. So when you get ready for market, the main goal is to make sure that you keep produce safe during post-harvest handling. And in some cases, you may need to wash your produce before taking it to market. The thing to remember with washing produce is you always want to have your wash water to use wash water that is potable or drinkable. You don't want to use water that you've collected in rain barrels or just out of the hose. You want to make sure that it is a potable source. The water also needs to be tested, and you need to maintain records of those water tests. Now, if you're using water that's from a municipal source, you can contact your local authorities for those records. However, if you are using well water, you do need to have that tested and keep records of it. The other thing that washing produce does, not only to keep it safe, but it also increases post-harvest quality by decreasing decay. So there are other benefits with using potable water to wash your produce. Sometimes water sources can become contaminated, and this can happen by having a cross connection between two water sources. So in the first picture, you can see there's a hose coming from a faucet, and the end of the hose is sitting in a bucket full of dirty water. Now, what can happen is if there's a decrease in or change in pressure in the water system, there could be some back siphonage of that dirty water up through the hose and into the clean water supply. So to prevent that, first of all, one way is to take the hose out of the bucket and prevent a cross connection. But then you can also install what's known as vacuum breakers or backflow preventing devices. And what happens there is you install this device between the hose and the faucet, and therefore if there should be any kind of change in the system that would cause back siphonage, the vacuum breaker would prevent that water from going into the clean water source and contaminating it. Research has also shown that when you wash produce, you want to keep the water temperature no more than 10 degrees cooler than the produce. The reason for this is that if you use really cold water, some produce will absorb that water. And if there should be some pathogens on the produce, it could bring that pathogen into the interior of the produce as it absorbs the water. Produce that's particularly sensitive to this are tomatoes, peppers, apples, and potatoes. But I would recommend that you wash all of your produce or rinse all of your produce in kind of lukewarm water. Don't have it too cold. When cooling produce, of course, you want to do that quickly because that's going to mean the optimum quality of the produce. But if you should use ice to help cool the produce, you want to make sure that is also from potable water because, again, the produce may come in contact with the ice. You don't want to overload your refrigeration. You want to make sure there's good air circulation in there so that the refrigerator can do its job in keeping the produce cold. And you also want to make sure your refrigerators have a thermometer inside so that you can make sure that you're keeping your produce at the optimum temperature, at least 41 degrees Fahrenheit or below. When transporting your produce from your farm to the market, make sure your transportation vehicles are clean. It's not recommended to ship produce that's in trucks that have maybe carried live animals or other hazardous chemicals. In some cases, if you're using an open truck, you may need to cover your produce to protect it. It's best to use a refrigerated truck if you can, but at least have an enclosed truck is probably the best bet. But if you do need to use an open truck, do put some kind of covering over it to protect the produce. Your bins and containers need to be what's known as food grade. Not all plastics are considered food grade. These are plastics that are allowed to come in contact with food. You want to avoid using containers that previously held chemicals or things like drywall compound, as shown in the bucket below there. These foods are not approved, or these containers are not approved to carry food in them. You also want to make sure that your containers and bins are cleaned and rinsed out well, and then also sanitized. And we'll talk about washing and sanitizing in another session. Finally, it's important to have a traceback system. A traceback system allows you to track a package, to know where it was, what field it was grown in, when it was packed. You should have lot numbers for all your loads so that if there should ever be a problem with your produce, that you could easily trace it back to find out where it was grown and determine if that was the cause of a problem. If you have any questions or would like more information about this program, you can contact me at alice.mullen@unh.edu. You can also go to our extension website where we have other information and fact sheets on food safety.